Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the country or outside India. In this series of conversation with social sector leaders, today we have Surbhi from International Innovation Corp. This conversation generally we host on other social sector to talk about impact, talk about why nonprofits are doing certain work that they're doing, the impact, the scale, and how, as an individual, I can contribute to their growth. Or if I am interested, I'm keen to join them, become part of their community or org. What are the ways? What is something that these nonprofits looks? And today we have Surbhi from International Innovation Corp. She is the country director in India. Welcome, Surbhi, on the podcast.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here and hopefully reach more young professionals.
Thank you, Surbhi. Those who don't know Surbhi is the country director at International Innovation Corp. She brings 8+ year experience in the social impact space. She is graduated from Christ University in economics. She did her master's from the Law School of India University, which is in Bangalore in public policy. And from last 5 years plus, she is working with International Innovation Corp. So, Surbhi, while we have been looking at news, social media, and then the fellowship that International Innovation Corp is has. We'll be talking around that, but why don't you share the story of International Innovation Corp, what and how you people started, and then how this is taking shape, and the work that you have been doing with uh, in India with the different ministries and the IIC Fellows. So it would be great to hear from you the story of IIC.
Right. So IIC started in 2014, but before that, there was a felt need that our founder had. Like our founder is Professor Anup Malani. He's a professor of economics at the University Law School of Chicago. And he was doing a lot of research, and a lot of researchers were coming to India to do research as well as work with the government to influence policy making. Around that time, he realized that there are two aspects to it. Firstly, translation of research into policy required a very different skill set, different kind of mental framework, and that the researchers didn't have. And the government's appetite to take whatever was recommended, change systems if needed, look at data, look at evidence to form decision making was something also at that point of time was seen was a restriction. So IIC was born with this, trying to fill this gap. And in 2014, when Anup started it, it started with an experiment. So we started with like 3 fellows who were trying to solve for it. He also realized that this is not a role that researchers can play for the government or government can play for the researchers, either way. So that's where we started looking at, can young professionals,
Mhm.
very aspiring, driven, passionate people do this? Can they translate the language of research to a policy? Can they look at data to inform policy? Can they play ecosystem level influencing role of getting more insights into what would mean well for the government?
Mhm.
And so with 3 fellows, we started one project. We saw there was a very good uh, appetite within the government to actually work with young individuals, right? It's a different kind of energy, it's a different kind of skill sets. The government really had a good interest in it. And over the last 10 years, we've expanded and grown from there. IIC works across multiple sectors. We work in health, education, livelihoods, governance, and more so now in the tech space. And we're
Mhm.
seeing that the changing nature of the social impact sector creates more avenues for young professionals actually to come into the place. So after 10 years of success, now IIC is also trying to expand. Given the success in India in 2017, we started a similar program in Chicago,
Mhm.
but there was a very different need over there. There was a very drastic scarcity of data skills in the government. So that's the fellowship in Chicago. It's called Applied Data Fellowship. And India is more generic, more open to different sectors and kind of skill sets.
Great. So currently, where are you working? You in Chicago and India or any other country geography you're working?
No, we're only in India and Chicago, and maybe touch wood in the coming few years expand to other countries.
I think we need more and more non-profit also in India to work, strengthen the governance, build better policies, and having IIC and few other non-profits. I think the ecosystem is also evolving, and then we're getting to have better policies. Surbhi, while I was just looking at IIC Fellowship, which is starting from the applications are starting from Jan 24th, 2025, and then ends on Feb 10th, 2025. Uh, you work across many streets. So, say, like, if you can talk more about the fellowship, how it started, what is something that you people do, would be keen to know more about that because those who are watching are the young folks just graduated or have been in the social sector for 3 to 5 years mostly. And some of these are also maybe in the mid senior range. So if they want to be part of IIC or similar programs, what will be great to talk if you can say more about the fellowship.
So, IIC is actually meant for those who are curious about government, governance, policy, social impact. And a lot of people actually, especially young professionals, don't know how to get into these spaces. The traditional understanding was either you have to give UPSC or you should have done social work to be in the space, right? But we're changing that. I joined IIC as a fellow myself with just basic curiosity to know how can I be part of policy making. And so the program is curated for young professionals. When we say young professionals, these are early in their career with 2 to 3 years of experience, trying to either pivot or explore. IIC is a fellowship. By the nature of it being a fellowship, it's more experiential. So you learn on the job. We do conduct trainings, and twice a year we do very formal training for our fellows, and then they get on the job mentorship by the management team, but a lot of it has to be learned while doing things.
Mm,
And so that's what we're looking for. When we look at fellows, we're looking at who has the appetite to change, who has the appetite to go beyond.
mm,
Our hypothesis is also that with 1 year of experience or 1 year of the fellowship experience that someone finishes, they have some kind of leadership influencing skills that can be deployed for the sector at large. So when they finish their fellowship, when they join other organizations, they are at a little more senior level, they are at a management level. So the entire fellowship is curated for you to learn those leadership skills. It
mm,
is a minimum of 12-month full-time commitment. Our fellows, when we hire them as a cohort. And we have multiple projects across different sectors. So typically, IIC places teams of fellows and not individual fellows on projects. And the way we curate our teams are that you could have a person who's done law, you could have an engineer, and you can have like a architect
mm,
doing a project on education. And the reason we kind of define that composition through diversity lens is that everyone brings a different perspective. And solving one problem statement does not necessarily need you to have expertise in it. You need to have the right kind of attitude and the right kind of skills and the right kind of mindset for it. That's more important. So the fellowship probably doesn't see what background you come from. It actually sees what kind of behavior and attitudes you bring to the table. Because to be fair, working with the government is a very different ballgame, and it requires a very different kind of personality type.
mm,
So when we are doing our selections, we really pay focus on the behavioral aspect of an individual and less on your professional background. After a year-long training, we have seen most of our fellows actually now more so than before wanting to stay back because the kind of projects we have, we work in the space of digital health, and I'll talk a little bit more about our project specifically. But the kind of projects we have, the kind of exposure, the kind of visibility it provides a young professional. You are
mm,
23, 24, 25-year old, you're sitting in an IS officer's room informing decision making on a day-to-day basis. It's very hard to get that very early on in the career. So cases that we've seen more and more people wanting to stay back, but the nature of the fellowship is that only some get to continue and some move on. Our fellows typically go work in, they're globally placed, so they're either pursuing masters after the fellowship. We've
Mhm.
seen most of them do MPP, MPA, MBAs, and also working in very different social impact organizations. They could be the likes of World Bank, the kinds of Center Square Foundation, in different sectors of their interest. But we've seen that the exposure of the fellowship actually helped them retain themselves in the social impact space.
Great. In the last few weeks, we were also speaking about it's not experience, it's more on exposure, the kind of exposure that you get in any workspace, any fellowship is becoming more and more important. And good to see that one individual's having these access. And the other thing that I was also when before coming to this podcast, I was looking at the talk, which also the stipend is fairly good or not fairly, but I think at the peak. So any fellow who want to get into IIC fellowship, while there are expectation, there are growth, there are learnings, there are exposures. You also get paid, which is maybe if we look at the social sector salaries of fellowship, you are at the upper end. So you have 1.1 lakh 5,000 stipend every year. So you're fairly compensated, and also you have been given professional opportunity to learn. Surbhi, you were speaking about behavioral aspect. Now, thinking if there are people who are watching this conversation and then they want to get into IIC fellowship, what is something that you look while selecting fellows and how the process looks like?
I'll start with the application process for someone who's preparing for it. Our applications open this week on the 24th. Um, we have a very exhaustive process of screening. So you submit your application. You're also requested to submit an innovation proposal on a given problem statement. We
Mhm.
want to see how you approach a problem statement, how much, what kind of approach you look at problem solving, because it's a very critical part of the fellowship. You would be given a problem statement like, how do you reduce malnutrition among kids in, let's say, Bihar? And there are many, many factors that affect it. So, are you able to break down what impacts that problem statement that is given to you, right? And then after your applications are submitted, we have a behavioral round screening, and that's the most extensive. We take the most amount of time over there. Largely, like I said, it is a mindset of working in the social impact sector. We are looking for someone who, because you're not expected to deliver on a project only, you're expected to go beyond. So who's that someone who does beyond what is asked of? And that's what stands IIC fellows apart from all the others, right? They go beyond. We have heard from partners who say that these are exceptional people because we've seen them really passionately feel about the problem statement, engage with them. We are also looking for people who are passion driven, but passion is not the only thing. So who are very interested in learning, who are constantly motivated to learn and upskill themselves. So what the project enables you to do could only be limited because it's a 1 year project. But
Mhm.
who's interested in upskilling themselves, building themselves? It could be about the subject matter, it could be about the skills that you need to apply, but someone who's very learning driven.
Mhm.
And I think one of the main things that we look for is emotional intelligence, and that's a given now that you need to have. Like I said, working with the government is a very different um, mindset. There are things you could be trying for months together and nothing moves. And then
Mhm.
one night, suddenly decision making has happened and everything is chaotic. So, someone who is able to manage themselves, who is aware of their own capabilities, about their emotions,
Mhm.
who's mindful of the environment you're working in, right? And one of the things we definitely check for is everyone has biases of how the government works.
Okay.
But are you in the system able to build yourself through an empathetic lens that the system works in a certain way? The
Mhm.
ecosystem or the social impact sector works in a certain way. Can you understand and then start building your opinions, your expertise, all of it? So I think we're looking for that. And like I said, problem solving. Are you strategic? Are you mindful? These are some of the criteria that we really, really look for in our fellows.
Right. You mentioned the problem statement and how does one approach I mean, how do they look at solving this, or maybe what is approach that they're taking? So, uh, one can pick, maybe there are 10 problem statements, and then they can pick one. Could be from tech and AI, could be in public policy, could be in public health, could be in education. And so you work across ministries, and one problem one can pick while submitting application. Is that the way, or
Yeah. So the
you?
innovation proposal will a prompt will have like multiple prompts
Mhm.
across different. You could pick one, and
Okay.
it has very specific guidelines in terms of what you need to do, how much you need to do. So I think the idea is that you take a subject or you take a theme that is given to you, but you engage with it. So
Mhm.
if the prompt is on education,
Mhm.
then are you only looking at education as an education problem? But education is also a nutrition problem. It
Mhm.
is also a livelihood problem. It is also, so how does someone approach a problem statement? One, your innovation proposal helps us. We also have a technical round. So after the behavioral interview, we have something called a technical round. And in that, we actually test you through case studies to see, are you able to think through um, on the spot, but also is your bent of mind to problem solving. So we have a two-level interview process as well for fellows. And once someone gets selected into the cohort, then projects are mapped. So the project mapping happens based on, like I said, we put them in teams, right? So
Mhm.
what the project requires, what could be the possible composition of a team. That's how project mapping happens at our end.
Great. So someone got into IIC Fellowship. How does a typical day at Fellowship looks like?
The interesting and the sad part is I don't think there is a typical day. Your day could vary from just purely doing research to doing research 1 hour, doing very high stakeholder meetings in the next hour, to doing capacity building by the end of the day and then attending a conference at it, right? Some projects have that level of variation. But typically, what happens in a fellowship period is
Mhm.
that when you're given a project, you're given 2 to 3 months to do something called scoping, which basically you're given the time to understand the ecosystem, the problem. If it's education, do your research, dig deep into it, basically, right? Understand why the problem exists. So that's called the scoping period. After which you start making recommendations. So you're not expected that the day you are put on a project, you start informing policy making. You need to have context to inform something. So once you have a design of a recommendation or a program, the responsibility is on the team to start moving the system towards it. It's not our job to do the work. It's our job to enable the system to do it, right? We are there for a period of time, but it's their responsibility. So the fellows work very closely with the teams that are there, the departments that are there, with the leadership of any organization to drive those recommendations. And when we say drive, it doesn't just mean I have recommended this to everyone will move in that direction to do it. There are problems that come in, there are challenges of finance, there could be challenges of capacity. How do you solve for them?
Mhm.
And so that is what you enable the system to do. Towards the end of a period, project period, we actually do something called documentation. So
Mhm.
all that you have done should come out and be retained with the agency you worked with, right? So it could come out in the form of policy reports, it could come out in the form of recommendations, it could come out in the form of playbooks or blueprints that fellows put together for someone else to deliver as we move ahead, right? So every fellow actually delivers very hard-coded documentation. And then there is a sustainability plan.
Mhm.
We're very mindful that in a year's time, you can't really create or change the world. But whatever you're given, are you doing justice and enabling the system to do it? So we've had projects that have been 1 year, but we've also had projects that are now spanning fifth year, 6 years. They happen because of the kind of work you've delivered that the partner is interested in engaging furthermore.
Right. I think while you were speaking about a typical day, I was also thinking about the post-fellowship programs, and some of this conversation you already mentioned about career after fellowship could be in different species. But also good to see that how IIC is investing in fellows, and good to see that we're speaking with you as a fellow, and the career pathway that you have is also show that commitment that a fellow could lead the larger ecosystem also. So one if you are looking to get into public policy space, or if you bring 3 year, 4 year experience, or have done masters, then 2 year experience, this space brings great exposure. Also, fellowship के साथ में, Surbhi, you have been in the ecosystem, and that's a typical question I ask at the while we are wrapping conversation is, there is so much that you have learned in the last 8, 10 years, and you bring the insights from Indian ecosystem, or maybe the global ecosystem, social impact space. And there are folks who are watching this conversation. If you need to give them a message, if they're exploring career in social sector, what would be your advice to them?
Um, yeah, I haven't like had 20, 30 years in the space, but in the last 8 years that I've also spent, the sector has changed and is changing. And hence there is a lot more avenue for young professionals to plug gaps here. But something that when we work, our cohorts are largely young professionals, so they're early career professionals, right? They bring the right energy. There's a lot of enthusiasm to do things and deliver. One thing I think I tell myself and I tell everyone who works with me is that the first 10 years of your career are meant for you to really, really be open to all sorts of possibilities. And that's when the magic starts happening, when you just are open to what it could be, the experience and the kind of exposure you could get.
Mhm.
That builds you as a professional. After 10 years, 15 years, you start becoming an expert in whatever you think, if you wish to be. But I think I would highly recommend anyone listening, anyone wanting to be part of IIC also, that you just have to be very, very open in this space. Nothing is said or set in stone. So rigidities don't help. They don't help when you work on the project. They don't help you in your career. We only know so much so far. Even I know only so much of the social impact sector, right? Every day you're learning something new. Every day the problem changes, the problem statement changes, the ecosystems changes, governments change. So you have to be open and very willing, accepting of wanting to experience something more. And I've seen those fellows or those young professionals who've taken the risk
Mhm.
to really try out different things, really, really go far.
Great, great. And thank you so much, Surbhi, for all your insights and talk today about IIC Fellowship. Those who are watching, if you're exploring career, if you're just starting your career, or if you are in early stage of your career, go explore International Innovation Corp Fellowship. And we are adding the link. It's link and more details in the description below. Uh, and we'll be coming back with more such conversation with the social sector leaders. Thank you so much, Surbhi, for the conversation. It was great to have you.
Thank you. My pleasure. And I hope to keep meeting you and talking to your followers a lot more.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We'll be back soon. Thank you.